I was 9 years old when my world ended in the most ordinary way, a phone call in the middle of the night. My Aunt Marlene was shaking me awake, her face pale and wet, her mascara smudged like she'd tried to clean her face with her fists. "Emma," she said softly, "your mom. There was an accident." My brain didn't even process what she meant at first. Accident? Like she broke a leg? Like her car got a little scratched? I sat up in bed, waiting for her to finish the sentence. But she didn't. That was the sentence. My mother, Julia, died instantly when a delivery truck ran a red light and T-boned her sedan while she was driving home from her night shift at the hospital. They told me later she never even saw it coming. That's supposed to be a comfort, I guess. That she didn't suffer. But I would have taken any amount of her pain if it meant I could have had her a little longer. After the funeral, something in my dad cracked in half. John had always been a quiet man, the kind who fixed things around the house and whistled while he worked. But now he was just gone. His body stayed, but everything else vanished. He stopped making breakfast. Stopped picking me up from school. Stopped talking altogether unless it was to tell me to leave him the hell alone. At first, I thought he just needed time. We both did. But time didn't fix anything. It made it worse. He started drinking cheap bourbon by the bottle, leaving half-smashed glasses on the kitchen counter. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of something crashing, picture frames, furniture, one time a dining chair he threw through the back door. I'd find him passed out on the couch, reeking of sweat and liquor, and I'd drag a blanket over him and sneak back to bed. That first year was a blur of moldy dishes, unpaid bills, and silence. No one cooked. No one cleaned. We stopped buying groceries. I learned to boil pasta and microwave frozen dinners, when there were any left in the freezer. I knew how to make toast with peanut butter, how to shake the crumbs out of an empty cereal box to fill a quarter bowl, how to hide cash from my dad so he wouldn't drink it away. I started wearing the same clothes over and over. Nobody at school said anything, but they noticed. Kids notice everything. I remember one of them, Logan, I think, telling me I smelled like old milk. That day, I went into the girls' bathroom and scrubbed my arms with hand soap until they turned red. One afternoon I came home to find the power was out. Not a storm. We hadn't paid the bill. I walked from room to room flipping light switches, as if that would magically turn it back on. I lit 3 candles from the kitchen drawer and ate a can of beans cold with a plastic spoon. When Dad finally stumbled in around midnight, he didn't even ask why it was dark. Just opened another beer, sat down, and stared at the wall like it had answers I didn't. The first time social services showed up, I didn't even know who they were. 2 people in press suits knocked on our front door, smiling too brightly. I opened it just wide enough to peek my head through. Behind me, the house smelled like mildew and dirty laundry. My dad was asleep in his chair again, snoring like a dying animal. "Hi, sweetie," the woman said. Her name was Melissa. "We're here to check in. Can we come inside?" I should have said no. I didn't understand what check-in meant. But I stepped aside. Melissa and her partner, a guy named Ryan, walked through the living room slowly, their eyes scanning every mess, every stain, every broken bit of our lives. They spoke to me gently, like I was a scared dog. I answered their questions. Yes, my dad lived here. No, my mom wasn't coming back. Yes, I went to school sometimes. No, there wasn't any food. They said they'd be in touch. After they left, I sat in the hallway for a long time, clutching my knees and staring at the cracked tile floor. For once, I hoped my dad would wake up and ask me what happened. But he didn't. 2 weeks later, they came back, this time with paperwork. Emergency custody order. I didn't cry when they took me. That part shocks people when I tell them. But I didn't. I packed a bag with 3 shirts, 2 pairs of socks, and my mom's old sweater. I didn't say goodbye to my dad. He never even woke up. The first foster home they put me in was with a woman named Cheryl. She smiled a lot and called me Han. But her house felt like a hospital. Too clean, too cold, too quiet. I wasn't allowed to lock the door to my room. The first night, she came in to tuck me in and touched my shoulder too long. I didn't sleep. She had another foster kid living there, a boy named Keith, older than me, maybe 15. He never talked, just glared. One night, I caught him standing outside my door, just staring in through the crack. When he saw me see him, he smiled and walked away. I told Cheryl. She said I was making things up. I stayed up the rest of the night with a chair jammed under the doorknob. I only stayed in Cheryl's home for 10 days before I asked to be moved. They didn't ask why. They never did. The second home was worse. A couple named Stan and Marie. They were friendly enough at first, but there were rules, hundreds of them. No talking at dinner. No closing doors. No bathing more than once every 3 days. I thought I could follow them, just to get by, but then Marie slapped me across the face because I forgot to fold a towel the right way. When I flinched, Stan told me not to be so dramatic. They liked obedience. They liked silence. One night, I heard Marie screaming at one of the other kids, an 8-year-old girl named Tammy. Tammy had peed the bed. Marie dragged her into the hallway, yanked her pajamas down, and whipped her with a belt in front of all of us. I was frozen. The other kids stared at the wall. No one said a word. I reported them to my caseworker, and 2 days later, all of us were pulled out and reassigned. I was 12 by then. 3 years since Mom died. My dad still hadn't visited me once. I'd been placed in 5 different homes. At school, I stopped talking unless I had to. I wore baggy clothes and cut my own hair with safety scissors in the mirror. I stole tampons from the nurse's office. I had stomach ulcers from stress, and no one noticed because I didn't tell anyone. My sixth placement was with the Thompsons. They were decent people, older, probably in their late 50s, and they didn't ask me for much. I think they understood that I needed space. They gave me my own room and let me choose whether to eat with them or not. The first night, they left a tray of food outside my door. No pressure. I cried when I saw it. Not because of the food, but because it was the first time in years someone had thought about me without needing anything back. At school, I started talking to a girl named Holly. She was loud and funny and sat next to me in math. One day she leaned over and whispered, "You always look like you're trying not to disappear." I didn't know what to say, but I smiled. We became friends slowly, cautiously. I didn't tell her much at first, just that I lived with distant relatives. But she figured it out. Kids like her know how to read between the lines. One afternoon, I came home and found a letter on my bed. My dad had written to the court asking for custody again. He'd cleaned up, apparently. Gone through a rehab program. Found work. I didn't know what to think. A part of me wanted to rip the paper up. Another part felt like maybe, there was still something left in him worth trusting. But that wasn't my choice to make. The court started reviewing his petition. I was given a guardian ad litem, a lawyer who asked me a million questions and scribbled things on a yellow notepad. When she asked if I wanted to go back, I told her the truth. I don't know, because I didn't. How do you go back to someone who let you rot? But that wasn't the worst part. A week before the court hearing, I got another letter, this one from a hospital. My father had been admitted for alcohol poisoning. He had relapsed. Again. They found him unconscious in a motel room with an empty bottle and a needle in his arm. He hadn't even made it to the hearing. That was when something broke in me. Not like the first time when Mom died. That was a splintering. This was different. This was like a switch flipping off. I stopped waiting for someone to fix things. I stopped hoping. I was 13 years old, and I already felt like my life had happened to someone else. I remember the first time I saw Aunt Linda again. It had been years. I was sitting in a small, airless room in the county courthouse, wearing the only decent pair of jeans I had. My caseworker, Janet, sat beside me, checking her watch every few minutes. The door opened, and in walked Linda Foster, my mother's older sister. Her face was pinched, her hair pulled back so tight it looked like her scalp hurt. She wore a tan blazer, no makeup, and it looked like she just smelled something bad. She didn't hug me, didn't smile, just nodded once and said, "Emma." That was all. Afterward, Janet leaned over and whispered, "She's willing to take custody. It might only be temporary." I nodded. I didn't really have a choice. They couldn't find any other family, and I was too old for easy placement. So custody was granted. Just like that. I moved in with her the next afternoon. I had no expectations, no hope. That probably saved me. Linda lived in a narrow two-story house on the far edge of town. Not a dump, but definitely worn. Paint flaking off the porch. Weed-choked lawn. The first thing I noticed when I walked in was how quiet it was. She had no husband, no kids. The place smelled like bleach and cold chicken. She didn't show me a bedroom. She led me through the kitchen, out the back door, and toward the detached garage behind the house. "This is where you'll stay," she said, unlocking a rusted padlock. Inside, the garage was freezing. The walls were unfinished, exposed beams and insulation patches black with mildew. No drywall, no windows. Just a single bare bulb hanging from a cord and a cracked concrete floor. Against one wall was a stained twin mattress, no sheets. In the corner, a metal bucket. That was the bathroom. I stood there, speechless. She turned to me and said flatly, "You're lucky I even agreed to this. Don't make me regret it." She slammed the door behind her and bolted it shut from the outside. That night, I lay curled up on the bare mattress, using my backpack as a pillow. I had 2 sweaters and a thin coat, but it didn't matter. The cold felt like it came from inside the walls. I could hear every creak of the wind outside, every scuttle of mice in the corners. I thought about screaming, but I didn't. There was no one to hear me anyway. The first week, she brought me 1 meal a day. A cold sandwich. Sometimes just plain bread and a slice of lunch meat. No drink. No plate. Just tossed onto a paper towel and slid across the floor like she was feeding a stray dog. When I asked about school, she said, "You're homeschooled now. I'll get you some materials." She never did. She took my phone for safekeeping. When I asked if I could call Janet, she said Janet was on vacation. I didn't believe her, but I couldn't prove otherwise. I started keeping count of the days by scratching lines into the wall with a broken piece of tile I found. 23 lines before anything changed. One morning, I woke up to the door swinging open and a man's voice. I bolted upright. "This the girl?" the man asked. His voice was raspy, like a smoker. I couldn't see his face. The light from outside was too bright. Linda nodded. "Don't worry, she's not going to say anything." The man stepped inside. Tall, wearing a mechanic's uniform. He looked around like he was appraising furniture. Then he turned and walked out. Linda didn't explain who he was. Later, I overheard them arguing in the kitchen. He wanted more money. She said she didn't owe him anything. I pressed my ear to the wall of the garage. The words "documented" and "placement fraud" came up. I realized he wasn't just some friend. He was blackmailing her. over me. The next week, she stopped bringing food altogether. I survived by sneaking out at night when she forgot to bolt the door. I'd dig through her garbage cans for scraps, expired fruit, moldy bread. Once, I found half a cup of milk in a throwaway latte cup. I drank it. It wasn't enough. After 13 days without a real meal, I collapsed. I don't remember hitting the floor, but I remember waking up with vomit crusted on my shirt and the smell of blood in my nose. My head felt like it was full of sand. I stayed there for a long time, wondering if I was dying. She never came to check. Eventually, I crawled to the door and pounded on it until my fists went raw. Nothing. No answer. Then I heard footsteps, but not hers. A different voice. Jesus Christ, someone said. Is there someone in there? The door opened. A teenager. Maybe 17. Messy hair, hoodie, cigarettes in his pocket. Holy, he started, eyes going wide. Are you okay? I didn't answer. I just looked at him. I must have looked awful. Sunken cheeks, bloodshot eyes, dirt everywhere. I live next door, he stammered. I thought this place was empty. His name was Ryder. He helped me sit up, handed me his water bottle, and said, "You need a hospital." No, I croaked. Please, don't tell her. She did this to you? He asked. Are you serious? I nodded. To his credit, he didn't freak out. He helped me sneak back into the garage, promised he'd be back the next night. And he was. Every night. He brought food, bandages, a flashlight. He even brought me his old sleeping bag. I should call someone, he said on the fourth night. They'll just send me somewhere worse, I whispered. He didn't argue, but he looked like he wanted to. Then one day, Linda found the wrapper from a granola bar in the corner. She exploded. Who's been here? She screamed, slamming the door open so hard it bounced off the wall. I tried to lie. I said I found it in the trash. She didn't believe me. She dragged me outside by the arm, down to the basement of her house, darker, damper than the garage, and shoved me inside a closet under the stairs. She locked it. You can stay there and think about what you've done, she hissed. I stayed in that closet for 3 days. No food. No light. No air circulation. I lost track of time. I started hallucinating. I saw my mom, plain as day, sitting next to me and singing lullabies. I knew it wasn't real, but I didn't care. It was the first kindness I'd felt in weeks. On the fourth day, the door opened. I was too weak to lift my head. It wasn't Linda. It was Ryder. His face pale, his hands shaking. I called someone, he said. Behind him, 2 police officers stepped in. That's when everything exploded. By the time I turned 10, I had figured out that no one was coming to save me. After everything with Aunt Linda, the garage, the closet, Ryder calling the cops, I spent another month bouncing between temporary shelters and holding centers. My caseworker changed again. This one was named Clarissa. She was nice, young, wore oversized glasses, and tried to relate to me by talking about Taylor Swift, but I didn't care about celebrities or songs. I cared about staying alive. Eventually, I disappeared. Not in a dramatic way. I just stopped showing up. One morning, I slipped out of the group home through the back gate while the staff were distracted with a fire drill, and that was it. I was off the grid. I didn't want to go back into the system. Every place they sent me made things worse. So I slept where I could, behind supermarkets, in construction sites, once in the tool shed behind a funeral home. I ate food from dumpsters or took what I could from gas station trash cans. But I knew I couldn't live like that forever. Winter was coming, and I was already running on empty. I needed money. Real money. I found the cafe by accident. It was a dingy little spot tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop called Harper's Diner, with flickering neon and cracked tile floors. It looked too small and too grimy to be corporate. That's why I chose it. The first time I walked in, I just stood near the counter and waited. A man came out from the back, middle-aged, tired, with tattoos up his neck and nicotine-stained fingers. His name was Ron. "What are you doing in here, kid?" he asked, wiping his hands on a filthy rag. "I'm looking for work," I said. My voice didn't even shake. He squinted at me, probably trying to guess if I was a runaway or just crazy. "How old are you?" 12, I lied. I figured 10 sounded too young. 12 gave me a shot. He snorted. "You don't look 12. I'm short." He looked me up and down again, then grumbled. "Can you wash dishes without crying?" I nodded. "Cash. No ID. You screw up, you're out." I started that night. My first shift was 5 hours long. My hands were raw from hot water and cheap soap. The steam fogged my glasses, and I slipped twice on greasy tiles. But I didn't quit. I didn't say a word. I worked like I'd done it my whole life. By the end of the week, Ron handed me an envelope with $125 in cash. I almost cried. I worked 4 nights a week. Sometimes more. I cleaned floors, took out trash, peeled potatoes in the back. Ron didn't ask questions, and I didn't give him reasons. I kept my head down and learned quickly. The waitresses called me Mouse Girl because I barely spoke. One of them, a heavy-set woman named Trina, once snuck me a slice of pie after closing. She told me I reminded her of her niece. I didn't say anything, but I never forgot the kindness. With my first few weeks of earnings, I bought socks, toothpaste, and a set of thermal clothes from a discount bin. Then I bought a secondhand backpack and filled it with snacks, a stolen flashlight, and a $15 prepaid phone from a clearance shelf at a corner store. I found a storm drain near a crumbling underpass and hid everything there. It was dry, hidden, and only I knew about it. I started keeping most of my cash in a plastic container wedged between the concrete and rusted grating. Every time I tucked money away, I'd count it $175, then $320, then $600. It became my obsession. I tracked every dollar. I made spreadsheets on loose paper, practiced math in my head, and even started calculating my own income per shift. I was careful not to draw attention to myself. Never took too much. Never asked for advances. Ron didn't care as long as I showed up. By the time I had $2,500, I could feel the weight of it in my chest every time I checked the hiding spot. It wasn't just money. It was proof I existed. Proof I was surviving. But one thing kept bothering me. School. I missed it. Not the kids. Not the noise. But learning. I missed books. I missed solving problems. I missed knowing what day of the week it was. I used to love writing essays, believe it or not. My mom had been a nurse, but she always said I'd be a writer. That thought stuck with me, so I came up with a plan. First, I went to a local middle school and watched the front office through the glass. I memorized the layout, the sign-in sheet, the bell schedule. Then I waited until the principal left one evening and followed her at a distance, long enough to get her name and find a few documents in the trash outside her apartment complex. I practiced forging her signature for weeks. Eventually, I walked into the school wearing clean clothes, holding a forged letter stating that I'd been previously homeschooled and was transferring in mid-year. The woman at the front desk, Mrs. Jeffries, raised an eyebrow but didn't push too hard. She asked me for records. I said we'd moved recently and they were still being sent. She nodded. By the end of the day, I had a schedule and a lunch card. I attended that school for 4 months without anyone realizing what I was doing. I lived in the back storage room of an old auto parts shop on the edge of the city. The owner, an elderly man named Vern, let me sweep the floors in exchange for letting me sleep there when it was cold. I never told him about the cafe. He thought I was just a weird homeless girl who liked math homework. I woke up at 5 a.m., walked to Harper's Diner, worked 2 hours cleaning up, then sprinted to school by 7:30. After school, I'd go back to the cafe or to the shop. I studied in bathroom stalls, stairwells, and under flickering lights. I aced every test. Not because I was smarter than everyone. I just had no distractions. No phone, no social life. Just purpose. One day, a girl named Lila noticed me re-wearing the same shirt for the 3rd time. "Do you live around here?" she asked. "Sort of," I replied. She didn't push. But she started sitting next to me at lunch. She brought extra food sometimes, an extra apple, or crackers, or a banana. I never asked, but I always took it. She never asked for anything back. One evening, I returned to the cafe after school and found Ron pacing out back with a cigarette. He looked stressed. "What's going on?" I asked. He exhaled a huge puff of smoke. "Health inspectors coming this week. I can't have you here if they ask questions." I thought I was being fired. I nodded. "Okay." But instead, he handed me $300 in an envelope. "For being smart enough to keep quiet," he said. "Lay low a few days. Come back Monday." I did. That Monday turned into another 5 months. Everything was working. I had money. I had shelter. I had school. Then, something I didn't account for happened. A sub-teacher, Mr. Brantley, asked for emergency contact info. When I didn't provide any, he flagged it to the administration. They called the number I'd written on my school records, a burner phone that hadn't worked in weeks. The next day, the counselor pulled me into her office. "Emma," she said carefully, "we need to talk about your family." My throat closed. I faked confusion. "Why?" "Well, we've been unable to reach them. And there are inconsistencies with your paperwork." That night, I didn't go back to the shop. I packed everything, money, clothes, notes, and vanished again. I've done it before. By the time I turned 12, I had already lived a dozen different lives. Runaway, foster kid, illegal worker, homeless student. I didn't feel 12. I felt ancient, like someone who had already survived too many things that should have killed her. But for once, I wasn't just surviving. I was building something. When I came back to school under a new name and faked address, yes again, I made sure to keep my head even lower. This time, I didn't just sit in the back of the class. I disappeared into it. No questions, no tardies, no noise. That's when Miss Jordan noticed me. She was the science teacher. Short hair, always wore sneakers with her dress pants, talked like she was 5 cups of coffee deep at all times. I liked her immediately, but I didn't trust anyone easily. Still, she kept me after class one afternoon. "Emma, right?" I stiffened. "Yeah." "You good with numbers?" I shrugged. "I guess. You scored 100 on the chemistry unit test." "No calculator." "I guess." She smiled. "You ever heard of the Northwest STEM Initiative?" I hadn't. "It's this program," she explained, pulling out a folder. "For underprivileged students. Hands-on science, tech, engineering, the works. They pair you with mentors. Help you find internships, scholarships, even housing assistance in some cases." I flinched at that last part. It was too close. Too specific. "I think you should apply," she said. I stared at the papers in her hand. I didn't want to sign anything. Signatures were dangerous. But then I saw the stipend amount printed on the bottom corner, $150 a week for participation. Paid. My stomach turned with hope and fear. That night, I spent 2 hours forging my guardian's signature using a sample I had scanned months earlier. It passed. I was accepted into the STEM program within 3 weeks. It met twice a week at the downtown learning center. Concrete walls, free vending machines, and the first working heating system I'd felt in months. The group was small, 8 of us. All kids from rough backgrounds, but I was the only one who didn't technically exist in the system anymore. That's where I met Claire. She was my assigned mentor. A software engineer from a startup in Portland, probably in her late 20s. She wore flannel and boots and looked like she belonged in a coffee shop, not a coding lab. But she saw through people fast. It took her exactly 2 sessions to realize I wasn't okay. The third time we met, she brought me a real sandwich, turkey and Swiss on rye, still warm. "You need to eat better," she said. I didn't ask how she knew. "You sleeping okay?" I stared at my laptop. "You have a place to stay?" Still silent. "Emma," she said, voice quieter, "I know what this looks like. You don't trust me. That's fine. But I'm not a cop. I'm not here to report you. I'm just here." It was the most honest thing anyone had said to me in 2 years. I didn't tell her everything. But I told her enough. Enough for her to say, "You ever heard of emancipation?" I hadn't. It's basically legal adulthood. It's hard to get approved. You need proof of income, education plans, sometimes a lawyer, but I've seen it done. "You've survived worse odds." The phrase stuck with me. "You've survived worse odds." I didn't say yes immediately. But I went home. Or rather, back to the tiny utility shed behind the old auto garage I was sleeping in, and started researching it on a stolen library tablet. It was complicated, but not impossible. I started documenting everything. I printed pay stubs from the cafe under the table using Ron's office printer when he wasn't looking. I collected receipts for food, clothes, supplies. I got a library card using my fake name and checked out books on basic law. I even started attending school board meetings, taking notes on what counted as educational progress. Claire helped me fill out the actual petition. She also connected me with a legal aid group that had handled youth emancipation before. One of their lawyers, Marta, agreed to represent me pro bono. She was sharp, sarcastic, and wore oversized earrings that looked like miniature chemistry sets. "We'll have to prove 3 things, Marta explained. That you can support yourself financially, that you're mature enough to live independently, and that emancipation is in your best interest. Your aunt, she's still your legal guardian." I nodded. "But she hasn't seen me in over a year." "She won't like this," Marta said. "Get ready." I was ready. The hearing was scheduled for April 10th. I spent the 2 months leading up to it building my portfolio, income logs, school records, real and forged, a list of references from the STEM program and the cafe. Claire even wrote me a letter of recommendation. 3 days before the hearing, someone slashed the tires of the cafe's delivery van. Ron knew it was the city inspectors again. But I had a feeling it was someone else. Linda had found out. I didn't know how. Maybe the court papers finally reached her. Maybe she had friends in social services. But when I showed up for the hearing, she was already in the hallway, standing there in a beige coat like she was attending a PDA meeting, not trying to pull me back into her hell. She looked at me like I was a cockroach. I looked right back. "You think you're grown now," she muttered. I said nothing. The courtroom was small. Just the judge, Marta, me, a clerk, and Linda with her new lawyer, some slick guy in a navy suit who kept calling me young lady in a tone that made my skin crawl. He argued that I was manipulated, that I was not emotionally stable, that I needed traditional family support. Linda sat there nodding like she hadn't locked me in a garage and left me to rot. Then Marta stood. "Your Honor," she said, holding up the folder of documentation we'd spent weeks building. "This is a young woman who has worked since the age of 10 to support herself. She has maintained a consistent income, kept herself enrolled in school, and even joined an academic advancement program. What exactly does her current guardian offer in comparison?" The judge leafed through the folder for a long time. Finally, he looked at me. "Do you want to say anything, Emma?" I stood. I didn't make a speech. I didn't cry. I just said the truth. I'm already living like an adult. I just want to stop hiding. That was it. The judge signed the order. I walked out of that courthouse legally emancipated at age 12. Linda didn't say anything. She just stood there, watching me. I never saw her again. Claire was waiting outside. She hugged me for the first time. I didn't hug people. I hugged her back. I had $2,800 in cash stuffed into a gym bag under my seat. I had my court documents in my backpack. I had a prepaid phone. And I had options. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running. I was walking forward. I was 17 when I heard her voice again. It started with a voicemail. I was coming home from work. I was interning at a local tech hub through a scholarship extension of the STEM program, still living in the same studio apartment I'd moved into right after emancipation. I had my own key, my own fridge, my own schedule. I still didn't sleep well most nights, but I slept alone, and that was enough. That day, my phone buzzed as I walked past the corner bodega. Unknown number. I almost deleted the voicemail without listening, but curiosity got the better of me. "Emma, it's Linda. I know this is unexpected, but I'm in a tight spot right now. I need somewhere to go for a few days. Just a week. I don't have anyone else. I know things were not perfect, but I'm still your family. I can explain. Please." I stood there frozen, holding my grocery bag full of frozen dumplings and dollar store shampoo, my thumb hovering over the screen. I hadn't heard her name spoken out loud in years. I'd kept her blocked on every social I had, changed addresses twice, kept my number private. But she still found me. I replayed the message twice before deleting it. But I didn't delete the number. 3 days later, she called again. I picked up. Emma, she said, surprised. What do you want? I asked. I need a place to crash. I lost my job, the landlord changed the locks, and my car broke down all in the same week. I don't need much. Just a bed. Or a couch. Just for a week. I have one rule, I said. 1 week. That's it. You're out on day 7. No guess. No exceptions. You break anything, you fix it. Of course. I swear. You won't even know I'm there. She showed up the next evening with one suitcase, a broken wheel, and an attitude like she was doing me a favor. She wore jeans that sagged around the waist and a hoodie with cigarette burns on the sleeve. Her hair was longer now, streaked with gray. She'd aged. Badly. The moment she stepped inside, I felt it. Like something sour had entered the room. The air shifted. But I had made a promise to myself. 7 days. Then she was gone. At first, she acted normal. Weirdly polite. She washed her plate, folded her blanket on the couch, even complimented my thrift store wall art. You've done okay for yourself, she muttered one morning while sipping instant coffee. Didn't think you had it in you. It wasn't meant as a compliment, but I let it slide. The first crack came on day 2. I came home from a late shift and found 2 beer bottles on the table. I don't drink. Not after growing up with the smell of bourbon baked into the floorboards of my childhood. I opened the fridge. Another 2 were missing. You drinking in my apartment? I asked. She shrugged from the couch. It's not like I'm driving anywhere. No alcohol. That's a rule. She raised an eyebrow. Didn't realize I was in prison. You're in my home, I said. You don't get to rewrite the rules. She rolled her eyes. I walked away. The next night, I got home at 10:30 and found her in the hallway, giggling. Not alone. She had brought someone back. A man. Probably in his 40s. Tattooed neck. Reeking of cologne and smoke. They were tangled up, drunk and loud. I lost it. Get out, I snapped. What? She slurred. Him. Out. Now. The guy started to protest. I pulled out my phone. Either he leaves now or I call the cops. Your choice. That sobered her up fast. She shoved him toward the door. He cursed under his breath the whole way out. Once the door slammed shut, I stared at her. You broke my rule. You lied. It was just one time. You don't get a second. She stormed into the bathroom and slammed the door. The next morning, she was silent. But things didn't go back to normal. Day 4, I noticed money missing. Not much. Just a 20 and a 5 from the envelope I kept hidden inside a shoebox under my bed. Only I knew about it. Except now she did. I didn't accuse her. I just moved the cash and installed a cheap lock on my bedroom door. That night, she picked the lock and left it swinging open. Didn't even try to hide it. Don't lock me out, she said flatly. You weren't invited in. You think you're better than me now, she snapped. You think that little certificate of yours makes you a grown-up? No, I said. What makes me a grown-up is that I don't lock children in garages. That shut her up. For a minute. On day 5, she started inviting people while I was gone. I came home and found cigarette butts on the windowsill and a lighter wedged into the couch cushions. I checked the closet. One of my coats was gone. She'd pawned it. I knew the signs. I confronted her. She smiled. You had so much hanging up in there. I figured you wouldn't miss one. You figured wrong. You owe me, Emma. That stopped me cold. I owe you. I took you in when nobody else wanted you, she said. I fed you. Gave you a place to sleep. You gave me a bucket in a freezing garage, I said. And you starved me. You hit me. You left me bleeding in a closet. She didn't flinch. I survived in spite of you, not because of you. She crossed her arms. I made you strong. No, I said. I made myself strong. All you ever did was try to break me. Day 6, I called in sick and stayed home just to make sure she didn't burn the place down. She spent the whole day sulking, pacing, muttering to herself. She tried to open my laptop once. I'd already changed the password. That night, I found a stranger sitting in my kitchen. Another man. I didn't ask his name. I just pointed to the door and said, out. Who the hell are you? He asked. This is my apartment. She's leaving tomorrow. You can leave right now. He laughed. Linda didn't. She looked furious. Emma, stop being dramatic. He just came over for coffee. You have 6 hours to sleep, I told her. Tomorrow morning you're gone. She lunged at me, not to hit, but to scream. Face red, spitting fury. You think this life is gonna last? You think you're special? You're nothing. You're still that scared little girl in my garage. I didn't blink. I didn't cry. I just turned and walked into my room. Locked the door. Slept with my phone in my hand. Day 7. She was still asleep on the couch at 9 a.m. I packed her things, what little she hadn't stolen, and set them by the door. Wake up, I said. She groaned. What now? You said 1 week. It's been 1 week. You can't be serious. I gave you a chance, I said. You wrecked it. I got nowhere to go. Not my problem. You're gonna abandon your own blood? You stopped being family the day you left me to rot. She stared at me for a long time. Then she stood, grabbed her bag, and walked to the door. Right before she stepped out, she turned back and said, "You'll regret this." I didn't answer. I locked the door behind her. Sat on the floor for 10 minutes. Let myself shake. Let myself breathe. Then I cleaned the place top to bottom. Sprayed everything she'd touched. Opened the windows. Lit every candle I owned. Washed every blanket. Scrubbed the couch. She left behind a single sock, wedged between the cushions. I burned it. After she was gone, I didn't let myself breathe easy right away. The door had closed behind Linda, but the air still felt heavy. She'd only been here for a week, 7 days out of the hundreds I'd spent alone, and yet her presence had soaked into everything like smoke. I could still smell her shampoo in the bathroom. Her voice echoed in my head louder than my own, but I'd promised myself something the night she left. This would never happen again. I started by throwing things out. I'm not usually impulsive. I'm careful, strategic. I weigh things. But this was different. It was instinct. Like cleaning a wound before it gets infected. First went the couch blanket she'd used. Then the chipped coffee mug I'd seen her drink from. The cracked ashtray I'd forgotten was even in the kitchen drawer. A few coasters from the old thrift store set we'd used when I first moved in. A memory in every object. Every object a risk. Next was the bed. It was the same twin mattress I'd dragged in from my first group homeroom, narrow, uncomfortable, the springs poking through one side. I'd used it out of habit, convinced I didn't need comfort. But after Linda slept on my couch, I couldn't look at the bed the same way. It was stained with old panic, and now, new resentment. I posted it online for free and left it on the curb. Someone picked it up within hours. I didn't even look out the window to see who. That night, I slept on the floor with a single blanket and my cat curled beside me. Her name was Fig. I'd adopted her 2 years earlier when I had saved enough from part-time work to afford the adoption fee and a decent vet visit. She was skittish at first, missing half her tail and scared of loud noises. I loved her instantly. We were the same, cautious, jumpy, but still capable of curling up when it felt safe. When Fig lay against my chest and purred that night, I cried harder than I had in years. The next morning, I called off work and told them I needed one mental health day. They didn't argue. By now I had a reputation at the tech hub for being the person who worked hard, never asked for help, and never made mistakes. They assumed I was burned out. I wasn't burned out. I was just finally letting myself feel the weight of everything I'd been carrying. I spent the entire day cleaning. Not surface stuff, but deep cleaning. I wiped every tile. Scrubbed behind the fridge. I even lifted the old rug to vacuum under it and found an earring I hadn't seen since I was 14. Tiny, rusted. I threw it away without thinking. Then I opened the folder. I'd kept it hidden under the loose floorboard near the window. Inside were physical reminders of everything. My emancipation paperwork, some of the STEM reports Claire had printed for me, old notes scribbled during the early days of my forged schooling. A photo of me at age 10, holding a tray of fries at Harper's Diner. I looked like I weighed 80 pounds. My shirt was too big, my hair ragged. I stared at the picture for a long time. Then I fed it into the shredder. Every single piece of paper, gone in 10 minutes. I didn't need them anymore. I kept only one photo, a Polaroid Claire had taken of me with Fig curled on my lap. I was 16. I looked tired but safe. That one I framed. The next day, I went out and bought a new bed. Queen size. Firm memory foam. No squeaks, no stains, nothing used. It cost more than I usually spend on anything, but I didn't care. I had saved for it, and it was mine. The delivery guys had to haul it up the stairs and nearly dropped it, but when it was finally in place, I collapsed onto it and felt something I hadn't in years. Relief. Then I made my next impulsive decision. I went to the animal shelter. I hadn't planned on getting another cat. Fig was shy, territorial, and slow to trust. But I walked through the rows of metal cages and saw him, a black and gray tomcat with one torn ear and a scar over his nose. He stared at me with yellow eyes like he knew me already. His name was Pepper. They told me he'd been rescued from a dogfighting ring. He'd survived, barely, and didn't like men or loud noises. I nodded. That was fine. I didn't either. The first night, Pepper hissed at Fig. Fig ran under the couch and refused to come out. I slept between them on the floor, whispering to both like a mediator in a cold war. By the third night, Fig let him sleep next to her. That was all I needed to see. I built a new routine after that. Every morning, I'd wake up, stretch on the mattress that was finally big enough to fit me comfortably, and feed both cats. I added a small desk near the window and bought a cheap espresso machine. My walls were no longer bare. I started putting up prints I liked, pieces I found from street artists, pages torn from vintage magazines. I painted one wall teal just because I could. For once, I wasn't trying to disappear into my space. I was trying to make it reflect me. I also started therapy. Online sessions twice a month. The first one nearly made me quit. The therapist, Janelle, was kind but direct, and when she asked me what my childhood was like, I felt like I'd been punched in the throat. It doesn't matter anymore, I told her. But you're still reacting like it does, she replied. She wasn't wrong. We talked about Linda. We talked about Aunt Marlene. About my dad. About the silence. About the heatless garage and the cracked concrete floor and the bucket in the corner. I told her about forging school forms and hiding cash under storm drains. You did what you had to do to survive, she said. But now you're trying to live. That's not the same thing. It took me weeks to understand what that meant. But when I did, something in my chest shifted. I was no longer surviving. I was living. There were still bad days. I still flinched when I heard shouting in the street. I still locked every door twice. I still carried a cheap stun gun on my keychain and checked the back seat before getting into my rideshare. But the difference now was, it wasn't out of panic. It was just preparedness. I wasn't scared of the world anymore. Just alert to it. Claire and I still talk sometimes. She had moved to Seattle for a new job, but we texted. Once in a while, we'd FaceTime and laugh about how awful I used to be at basic Python syntax. You've changed, she said once. But not in the way people mean when they say that. You've just grown into who you were supposed to be. I didn't know how to respond to that. So I just nodded and smiled. One afternoon, I found a small box in the very back of the top kitchen cabinet. It was taped shut and covered in dust. I didn't remember putting it there. Inside was the last thing I'd forgotten to throw away. Linda's key. The one I gave her the week she stayed with me. She'd left it behind like it meant nothing. But in her hands, it had felt like a threat. I stared at it for a long time. Then I walked it outside, tossed it into the dumpster, and never looked back. That night, I sat on the floor between Fig and Pepper, eating dumplings and watching a terrible crime documentary. I turned off all the lights except for the warm lamp near the couch, and for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't just in a home. I was home. No one had built it for me. No one gave it to me. I didn't inherit it. I didn't escape into it. I made it. There were no secrets in the floorboards. No yelling. No one watching from the crack in the door. No one waiting to steal from me. No one knocking at midnight. No more Linda. No more fear. Just space. Peace. And two cats that had learned, like me, that sometimes it takes being hurt to recognize what safety feels like when you finally have it.